Hello there. Sci-fi and satire have always walked a tightrope when it comes to box office success. For every Men in Black, there's a Lost in Space, and for every Dr. Strangelove, there's a Bonfire of the Vanities. Combining the two certainly feels like it would be a fool's errand. But director Paul Verhoeven was brave enough to attempt this feat and would do it with great critical and commercial success in 1987's RoboCop and then again in 1990's Total Recall. So he seemed like the perfect choice to take the job on again in 1997 for Starship Troopers, especially as it would reteam him with RoboCop producer John Davison and co-writer Edward Neumeier. Neumeier had been working on a story called Bug Hunt at Outpost 7, a war film where the enemy was someone everyone could get behind rooting against. Insects. Part war movie, part teen romance, all action. He brought the idea to Davison in 1991, and Davison realised it bore a striking similarity with the 1959 Robert A. Heinlein novel Starship Troopers, a jingoistic, pro-military, anti-liberal story about a war between the virtually entirely militarised future Earth and the giant alien bugs that lived in an ant-like communal society on the planet of Klendathu. The novel is highly critical of the supposed moral decline Heinlein saw in 1950s America, where he saw what he believed was a generation of spoiled and undisciplined young people. Believing the rights to the book would not be free, Neumeier completed his own script and submitted it to TriStar, where it was promptly rejected. After learning the rights were available, Davison and Neumeier pitched Starship Troopers instead, and it was greenlit, with Neumeier adapting his original screenplay to more closely fit the novel. His first draft was very close to Heinlein's vision, giving the audience a view of a future society that worked, but was deeply fascistic, to contrast the imperfect democracy of the current-day US. Verhoeven was approached soon after and was intrigued with the idea of working with stop-motion supremo Phil Tippett again, as he had also been recruited after working on RoboCop. Verhoeven found the novel boring and right-wing, too militaristic, fascistic and pro-war, which clashed with his own beliefs, formed as a child in the Nazi-occupied Netherlands during World War II. He insisted the tone of the film be changed to parody and satirise the concepts of the novel by taking them to such an extreme that audiences couldn't help but see how ridiculous this version of a perfect society was, and adding some greyness about who the real aggressors were.
The bugs send another meteor our way, but this time we're ready. Planetary defenses are better than ever.
This second draft, also partially influenced by the budgetary constraints, meant cutting some of the more expensive action scenes and tech and adding the love triangles and future news network that only broadcasts propaganda.
To ensure the safety of our solar system, Klendathu must be eliminated.
The film then entered something of a development hell, as Verhoeven's career had some highs and lows. The studio went through a series of executives, none of whom were willing to proceed. In order to jumpstart the project, Davison, Verhoeven and other key crew shot some test footage, showing off the visual effects of the bug. The then current TriStar execs were so impressed with the footage, the project moved into pre-production in 1995. Reluctant to stump up the full $90 million required, Davison approached Disney to co-produce the film via its Touchstone Pictures studio, splitting the costs and profits equally with TriStar. When casting the film, Verhoeven specifically looked for actors who might have been at home in the Hitler Youth, young, beautiful but not very well known. Verhoeven would later comment, perhaps unkindly, that on reflection he should have cast his stars based on ability rather than looks. The rest of the cast filled out with some Verhoeven regulars, dependable character actors, and one child star attempting to shed his Doogie Howser image. The main actors in the young cast were sent through boot camp with retired Marine captain and Hollywood's go-to military advisor, Dale Dye, who put them through their paces as he had done with the cast of Platoon before and would do with the cast of Band of Brothers later. Location filming was beset with problems, from extreme weather conditions and illness to a tragic accident between filming. With the heavy use of CGI not commonplace at the time, the actors struggled acting at nothing, resulting in crew having to invent techniques to deal with it. But eventually, after 6 months location and studio shooting had completed, post-production, including the addition of 500 special effects shots, equating for around half the film's budget, began. While Phil Tippett's creature effects were completed without issue, Sony TriStar's in-house studio, Sony Pictures Imageworks, fell behind with their spaceship effects, and the filmmakers didn't like their results, which allowed Davison to reach out to other effects houses, which is what he wanted to do in the first place. Released in 1997 in a busy marketplace, it managed to open first at the box office, and was TriStar's third best performing film of all time. But the momentum could not carry it on, and it finished its worldwide run with a $121 million box office haul against its $105 million budget. Critics and audiences failed to pick up on its satirical edge at the time, viewing it as a straight pro-war action film for good and ill, and some viewers even went as far as to suggest it was a pro-Nazi film made by Nazi filmmakers. Even those who did spot the satirical elements felt they weren't done well enough for viewers to pick up on the satire, making it redundant. However, in the years that followed its release, it has been rediscovered and reappraised, as new audiences are more accepting of the obvious satire in plot, performances, and the look of the film. Outside of the social and political state of the world at the time, it has become appreciated as a clear and cutting satire of military fascism, and the concept of the perfect society under the boot of dictatorship, so desperate for an enemy that it will always find one. The heroes of the film are the blank slate soldier who does exactly what he's told, and the amoral psychic scientist who ends the film in full SS gear. As disgusting as the bug designs are, the only proof they are the aggressors and not the oppressed comes entirely from government propaganda. While it's unusual that we aren't really given more indication that humanity may not be in the right, it is incredibly bold to make the audience do the hard work, and this is perhaps why it failed in theatres but has worked better on home video. The big question, though, as always, is it any good? Yes it is. Perhaps not as beloved as the other famous flops I've covered at this point, but still very well done. The first act is a little slow to get going, with the jump ball scene dragging on repeat viewing, but it's also the most obvious in setting up the satire, with all the veterans still proudly militaristic, despite all of them having been somehow disabled from their combat experience. The FedNet propaganda footage of kids being encouraged to squash earthbugs is also pretty on the nose. Where the film struggles, though, is with how much time we spend with the main characters at the start and how they are all unquestioningly loyal to the system. We get to know and like them, and as a result have no reason to believe that they're in the wrong as the film goes on. Even if they are misguided or brainwashed, it's not their fault, and so it's hard to think that they've all got it wrong. But this is also the strength of the satire, because that's exactly how fascism works, convincing people that they are doing the right thing, whatever they're actually doing. The harsh realities of war and the graphic violence, as in RoboCop, are meant to disgust, And while you aren't meant to empathise with the fascist soldiers, you are supposed to sympathise with their situations and their deaths. Deaths purely to keep the war machine running.
Some say the bugs were provoked by the intrusion of humans into their natural habitat.
As much as I enjoy the film, even the performances, which I think perfectly suit the tone, I do think some of the satire is a little too subtle and could have been established better. For example, the infamous unisex shower scene is intended to show us that in this fascistic future society, no one has a libido anymore, so nudity means nothing even to these teen idols. Showing that this idea of the future where partnering and breeding is a duty rather than a choice, it doesn't matter about sexual desire. But this was lost on me for a long time, and I thought it was to demonstrate how the military would ensure that men and women are trained and treated to have no shame. This idea of a lack of libido also kind of conflicts with the two different love triangles at play. If citizens have no libido, then there's no reason that these love triangles would exist. Once you become aware of what the true messages of the film are, I don't think it's possible to put that aside to enjoy this as a pure brain-off action film. And I think that's by design, as you notice more and more of the anti-fascist messages layered within the film, from beginning to end. It forms a neat trilogy with RoboCop and Total Recall, all displaying an imperfect future, serving as a warning of how different elements in our world can spell disaster if they are allowed to be all-encompassing. And I'm really glad that it eventually found its audience, despite its rocky start. Thank you. Goodbye.